Hello friends, today we are going to start the respiratory system of the rat. In the respiratory system of rat, we will first of all learn about its role. All the animals eat food. Animals eat food and food acts as fuel, which fuel will provide us the energy for all the metabolic activities to be done. Now, how the energy is released? Energy is released by the oxidation of food. In the oxidation of food, oxygen is being used and carbon dioxide as well as energy is released. We can say it is the similar process as burning of coal in presence of oxygen, in which carbon dioxide plus energy is released. And also we needs the continuous supply of the oxygen because we want the process to be gone through all the time. So one of the function of food taken by animal is to act as fuel and provide energy for all the metabolic activities. Energy is released by the oxidation of food inside the cells. Similarly, in oxidation of food, oxygen is used and carbon dioxide and energy is released. As similar to the burning of coal in presence of oxygen to yield carbon dioxide as energy. To keep the oxidation going on, there is thus a constant need for the supply of oxygen to the cell and for elimination of carbon dioxide from them. Hence, exchange of gases, that is supply of oxygen and elimination of carbon dioxide, brought about by the respiratory system. Now we will study about its component. Component of the respiratory system are respiratory tract and respiratory organ. If we want to define the respiratory tract, the respiratory tract is basically the pathway for which fresh air enters. Fresh air enters and carbon dioxide is released. Respiratory tract serve as the pathway for the fresh air going to and foul air coming from the respiratory organ, where the actual gas exchange takes place. Now we will study about the components of the respiratory tract in details. First of all, external nares, then nasal chamber, then internal nares, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, and bronchioles. First of all, there is external nares. It is a pair of oblique slit situated under the fleshy tip of snout. If we are seeing this is the snout. This triangular region is the snout, and we are able to see there are two oblique slits. There are two oblique slits present below the snout, and they are known as the external nares, from which the respiratory tract starts. Hence, external nares led to the nasal chamber. Nasal chamber is a pair of long passage above the palate. Above palate, we can say above the buccal cavity. What is nasal septum? In the rough diagram, if we want to show the nasal septum, if this is the one part of the nasal chamber and this is the other part of the nasal chamber, this median vertical partition is known as the nasal septum. So, nasal septum, two chambers are separated from each other by median vertical partition. Okay, now each chamber is further divided into three regions, that is in three regions. These regions are anterior, middle, posterior. Anterior is vestibular, middle is respiratory and also known as transitional region. Posterior is olfactory. Anterior region is very smaller part that it lies within the external nares. It is a very smaller part, but the respiratory and olfactory regions form greater part of each nasal chamber. They occupy the larger space. Also, we can say that they bear three conchae or turbinates to increase the surface area, which will be study after some time. So here's the diagram of VS of nasal passage. We can see that this is the buccal cavity. Above the buccal cavity, above the palate, there is nasal chamber. This is the nasal chamber. This is the nasal chamber in which three conchae. Oh, firstly, it is divided into three regions. That is anterior. This anterior region, this anterior region is vestibular region, very small part. This middle region and this red colored is the olfactory region. Now, to increase the surface area, there are three type of conchae or we can say turbinates are present. First of all, it is superior nasal conchae, then middle nasal conchae, then inferior nasal conchae. In this diagram, the upper part is the superior or dorsal nasal conchae, also known as the nasoturbinates. This lower part is the maxilloturbinates, inferior or ventral part. Inferior nasal conchae, ventral nasal conchae, or we can also say that maxilloturbinates. In this olfactory region, there is presence of ethmoturbinates, that is lateral conchae or middle conchae. So I hope this diagram is cleared that this is the nasal chamber. It is divided into three parts. Firstly is squamous, then respiratory or transitional, and third one is olfactory. Olfactory and transitional forms the greater part, while the vestibular forms the smaller part. We can also learn about the properties of the regions. It is very short, lies within the skin, hair, and contains sebaceous glands, while the respiratory region is highly vascular, made up of ciliated columnar epithelium rich in mucus cells, and the posterior is made up of olfactory epithelium which help in smell. These forms the greater part. They bear three conchae or turbinates just to increase the surface area. So turbinates are thin scroll-like projection. They are thin scroll-like projections. Nasal, maxillary, ethmoid. Nasal and maxillary are present in the respiratory region. Nasal is also known as superior nasal conchae and maxillary ventral nasal conchae. Ethmoid is present in the olfactory region, also known as the lateral nasal conchae. So, external nares to nasal chamber to internal nares. Internal nares bounded ventrally by the posterior free semicircular edge of soft palate called uvula. We can see in the diagram this is the opening of the internal nares, and this uvula, it rises up during swallowing to close the passage. Rises up during swallowing to close the internal nares, so food doesn't enter the respiratory tract. Now internal nares will lead to the pharynx, then to larynx. Firstly, we will observe that This was the nasal chamber, all nasal chamber. Then nasal chamber to internal nares to pharynx, pharynx to larynx, larynx to trachea, then trachea further divided into primary bronchus, then bronchi, then bronchioles, finally into the alveolus. I hope the tract is clear. The respiratory tract consists of these parts: larynx, trachea, then these are the lungs. We will read about it in details in respiratory organs, then finally to the alveolus. Now, if we talk about the pharynx is divided into three parts. Pharynx is divided into three parts: nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. As shown in this diagram, that larynx is firstly divided into the nasopharynx, then oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. We can also learn from this diagram that pharynx is divided into three parts. The yellow portion is nasal pharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. I hope you guys understand it. Now, the pharynx is lined by the ciliated epitheliums and muscles in its wall. It contains muscle in its wall, and a slit-like aperture glottis is present on the floor of the pharynx, which is further covered by the epiglottis, cartilaginous flap epiglottis, at its anterior margin. During swallowing, the larynx moves up forward to meet the epiglottis that closes the glottis to check the entry of the food into it.